on Syria. You probably have seen that the situation in Aleppo has gotten pretty bad. Thousands of people are fleeing. The atmosphere in Geneva appears to be one of pretty much doom and gloom on the humanitarian aid front. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about both of those.
Well, we're watching the Syrian regime offensive near Aleppo very, very closely, and we've seen reports that Russian airstrikes are also supporting this offensive, and we are concerned about what they're doing, what their intentions are, and who they're striking. You're right. We continue to be concerned about what is a worrisome trend in humanitarian access. It's not going in the right direction. We continue to urge the regime to allow unfettered and sustained humanitarian access, which it hasn't been doing, and we're continuing to press that case with Russian counterparts.
And do you regard the government's attacks in Aleppo as violations?
Well, to the degree that they are targeted and going after opposition groups or civilians, absolutely.
So what is the consequence of these violations?
Yeah. Well, the bigger consequence is we get no closer to a peaceful solution to a civil war. And I know that's not the answer you want, but we're going to continue to collect information and the data on violations of the cessation. And there are continued violations of the cessation that aren't just happening in Aleppo. They're happening elsewhere in Syria. We're continuing to work through the task force to collect the information and the data, to analyze it, to create a record here. And at the same time, doing everything we can to press, in this case in particular, the Russians, to continue to use their influence to try to get Assad to stop this activity. Aleppo in particular, and it's important to remember that it's a mixed environment there. I mean, to be honest, that there aren't just opposition groups there. We do believe that there are pockets of Nusra and perhaps even Daesh in and around Aleppo. So we're watching this I wouldn't call it a campaign. That's probably not a fair way of describing it. This offensive in Aleppo, we're watching it very, very closely. And to the degree that opposition or civilians are being targeted, we're going to monitor that, we're going to track that, and we're going to raise that case.
So the consequence then is that you get written down in a book someplace? To what end? Is the plan somehow to prosecute or to go after those at some point who violate the cessation of hostilities? Because otherwise, what is the incentive?
Sure.
For
there could be ramifications down the road. Right now, we're focused on monitoring and assessing these violations and keeping an accurate record, and then trying to use the appropriate amount of influence on those who are violating it. And by and large, the violations continue to be against the regime, and Russia continues to be really the only party that has credible influence with the Assad regime right now. I'm not going to rule anything in or out at this point about other methods or measures of accountability which may occur in the future. That's why, because we're not going to rule anything in or out right now, we're going to continue to analyze this data and continue to keep track of it.
I'll stop after this, but I just don't understand how do you expect to convince people to respect the cessation of hostilities when there is no consequence for doing it?
I didn't say there would be no consequence.
But there isn't any right now. There's nothing.
Right now, the focus is on
someone writes it down.
And look, largely, it is still holding. There have been and continue to be violations. I note that. I admit that. But largely, it's still holding, and the violence in Syria is largely down. And there's no question about that. And it's lasted a heck of a lot longer than I think anybody originally thought at the outset that it would.
Or not lasted.
And well, again.
I mean, it's a cessation of hostilities in name only. The hostilities haven't ceased.
No, I would disagree with that. I wouldn't say it was in name only. There have been violations, absolutely. We have seen reports of what we believe to be violations of the cessation as they continue to move on Aleppo, including reports that Russian airstrikes have been supporting it and therefore could be in violation. And we're going to keep monitoring that. We're going to keep